So this amendment has 6 parts. And look, it's rare that we kick off a program, a $1 billion program, without any type of strings attached. And so what I think this amendment will hope to do is better administer the program. First of all, I believe that when the bill that passed out of here in the Senate in both special sessions, it prioritized economically disadvantaged, and this amendment would change it from the currently 500% of federal poverty to what we passed out of here, which would be 50% at 185% of federal poverty, 30% between 185 and 500, 20% for students with disabilities, and 10% whoever else applies universally. It would also require that a private school should be open for 3 years so that we can prevent the pop-up unaccredited private schools. It also has a conflict of interest provision so that a certified educational assistant organization should be required to honor conflict of interest provisions and not be directing people to private institutions where they have a potential conflict. We have a use it or lose it provision so that funds expire after the following year. And finally, we have some accountability through having the CEAOs, the education service providers and vendors, having them subject to the Texas Information Act, because these are public dollars. Members, these programs are not going to be universal without all school-age children. So this amendment adds licensed, high-quality child care and learning centers as pre-approved providers. I believe that these folks will be on the front lines of setting the foundation for educational attainment for the next generation. And in many of our big cities, most of the private schools are legacy schools that cost much more than this voucher. So we think that this amendment is some belt and suspenders. If we're going to be putting $1 billion of taxpayer dollars into this program, we should mitigate the risk that come without having accountability. So we want to make sure there's accountability. I want to make sure that there is public trust in our government. And so all elements of this program should be subject to the Texas Public Information Act so that people can understand and see where their tax dollars are going to work. With that, Mr. President, members, I move adoption of floor amendment number 15.
Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask questions of the author of the amendment.
Senator Menendez, do you yield?
Yes, of course.
Senator Menendez, I'd like to ask you questions on just 2 portions of this bill.
Sure.
First, on the child care portion of the bill. We really are struggling with early childhood education and child care in the state of Texas. Do you know how much child care is in my county?
I can only imagine it's got to be at least in the $10,000 range. That's about the average statewide, if I'm not mistaken.
It's $13,000, which approaches the cost of 1 year at the University of Texas. And recently, the county passed a bond initiative to subsidize child care for a certain portion of our residents. The bill in its current standing has a below 500 FPL eligibility for ESAs. How many children are living at 200% FPL in your district?
According to the Census Bureau, it's approximately 23,000, 36% of kids under the age of 6 who are at 200% of federal poverty levels.
So I know that Bexar County is not quite as bad as some of our other counties with regard to the expense of child care. Are you aware of which counties have the highest, counties and cities have the highest cost for child care?
I would imagine Austin. I would imagine Dallas, probably Houston, probably our most populated areas, because there is such a demand for it. And if you have a higher population, possibly higher paying jobs, and therefore the market they're going to get whatever the market will bear.
So would your bill, would your amendment help us solve some of these childcare deserts that we are seeing, where you simply can't find childcare, you can't get a slot?
Well, if we include early child care, then you have people who are currently making a decision whether or not they can afford to go back to work because the cost is so expensive. So if they receive one of these education savings account applications at $10,000 and it's now only $3,000, now the job becomes, whether or not they can take the job becomes much easier. In essence, it helps the children get early childhood, get good education, get started on a good education at an early age, but also helps people go back into the workforce. So it's a workforce development issue as well.
And I want to now pivot to the FPL provision of your amendment, because this is so important, I think. As you talk about the workforce, I was looking at the 500% FPL. So how much does that work out to per household?
If it's a family of four, it's a little bit over $160,000.
So at $160,000, I just did a quick glance at American Communities Survey. About 80% of Texans are at 500 FPL or below.
That doesn't surprise me.
We've heard Senator Creighton talk about teachers and firefighters. Do you know roughly how much the average salary is for a teacher or a firefighter?
I know starting teachers are in the 45-ish type range around there. I don't know firefighters and police officers at this time.
About the same range. We're talking, 40 to 60.
Okay. So then combined, maybe 100,000?
Yeah. So we're talking about, 200% federal poverty line for teachers and firefighters. At 500% FPL, what professions do you imagine would classify as low income at 500% FPL?
My understanding is a lot of engineers. My understanding is some software developers, some law school professors, some pharmacists, optometrists, folks who have got pretty good jobs.
So I see that your amendment would devote 50% of the available positions in the program to families who are at or below 185% FPL, which in your layout you mentioned was how this ESA passed out of this Senate last time. Right. Why did you settle on 85% FPL?
Families who are at 185% of family poverty levels are the ones who qualify for free and reduced lunch in Texas. So this would assure that the bill accomplishes what it aims, what was set out by Senator Creighton in his layout, that it's going to give low-income families and families with disabilities a priority in the bill. My concern that is that if the bill at 500% is 80% of the population in Texas does not really, if everyone's a priority, then no one's a priority. And that's my concern.
And I'm just going to wonder out loud this question. If we did want to redefine low income in the state of Texas as 500 FPL, why not apply that definition of low income to Medicaid expansion?
I think anything that would help reduce the number of uninsured in this state, I would be for.
Thank you so much for your amendment.
Thank you. Move adoption.
Chair recognizes Senator Creighton on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we're going to oppose this amendment.
The question is on the amendment. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hagenbu, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Nueces.
There being 11 ayes and 20 nays, the amendment fails.